Welcome to episode 72 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I once got kicked out of a wedding for dancing like Linnea Quigley.
I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and I'm actually the person who threw James out when he started dancing.
If only that story was true.
I'm Jeff Strand, author. I got kicked out of my own wedding for dressing like Linnea Quigley.
Oh, man. Jeff, we're excited to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here.
Why don't you tell our listeners a bit about yourself? And I know you got some new stuff out as well. So
I'm a author, generally horror author. I do occasional switches to other genres, but 90% of what I write is horror, and most of that is horror with lots of humor. So generally, if you ask people what I write, they'll say, oh, he's the horror comedy guy. So that's pretty much what I write, which makes tonight's movie a good choice. My latest book is called Autumn Bleeds into Winter, and it is my entry into the coming-of-age horror novel genre. So it is about a 14-year-old in Fairbanks, Alaska in 1979 who knows that his neighbor is the one responsible for the abduction of his best friend. And because the police aren't able to prove it, they investigate, but they can't prove it. So he decides to go confront his neighbor himself. And that is the launching point of this tense thrill ride into terror.
Nice. That's pretty sweet. Recently, I saw a conversation on the difference between coming of age and young adult. Do you have any definitive answers on what the difference between the two is?
Yes, I do. Part of it is because I've written like 5 young adult novels, and there's very little crossover in my audience. So the kids who will read my comedy, The Greatest Zombie Movie Ever, they aren't reading my adult stuff, and my adult readers aren't reading the young adult stuff. They aren't going backwards with that stuff. So I thought I need to get ahead of this because the protagonist in Autumn Bleeds into Winter is 14. So I was worried that people say, oh, it's another young adult book. I'm going to skip that one. So I thought I had to get ahead of that and say, no, this is coming of age. And the key difference in this case is that young adult books, by definition, are actively in the teenage perspective. So if the character is 14, he's writing the story as a 14-year-old, whether it's first person, third person, present tense or what, it's filtered through the mind of a 14-year-old. Whereas Autumn Bleeds into Winter is the narrator as an adult. He's actually writing it in its present day, probably not 2020 because he would be whining about coronavirus, but more or less present day, looking back at 1979. So he's writing it, knowing how things have changed, knowing how it all turns out. It's the story is about a 14-year-old filtered through the mind of a 50-year-old. So it's, that's what makes it coming of age. So it falls more into the category of, Robert McCammon's Boy's Life, Stephen King's The Body. Not as good as those two, but in that type of storytelling as opposed to a young adult novel. So it is very much a book for adults and not for the teenagers. I'm sure the teenagers will enjoy it too, but that's not the target audience.
Yeah, I really like that line, and it's so easy too, but it makes so much sense. Like when I think coming of age, like clearly it's about the transition. And when you're in the transition, it's hard to see. So like right there, that totally makes sense that would be the major difference. I like that a lot.
I've done my job here. So even if I completely botch the movie discussion, I have contributed some wisdom.
You won't. It'll be fine. I had never really thought about it till I saw the conversation online, and I realized the transition thing was so important in that difference. And I started thinking about like my own son. You know, he's 18, recently moved out on his own because Corona is the best time to do that. And, you know, just that whole, like, when you're going through it, all you can see is today. Like, you don't have that true, this is the change, because that's what coming of age is to me. This is the change that happened, and it's the story of that change and how you get there. And you can't report on that while you're in it because you don't know where it ends. And so, yeah, I really, really like that definition. Thank you.
You are free to use it.
Don, do you have anything to add to that? Any insight of your own?
I'm kind of just trying to revisit those moments where, because again, it's hard to think about it at the time. Mm-hmm. And I think it's easier, of course, looking backwards to figure out, you know, this was that defining moment for when I was a teenager or when I, you know, became an adult. And, you know, I would even say going further than that, I've talked with you, James, about this before, where I didn't really feel like an adult until I was around 32, 33 years old.
Right.
And I don't mean that in some way of, oh, there was this profound moment. It was just one of those things where so much stuff was working and you start to figure out, you know, you start to see that you may have figured some things out. And that's that moment when you start to deal with your own mortality and realize, holy shit, I've done all this stuff with my life. What else is there? You know, so you just chase that clock, I guess.
Maybe it's just that point where boys finally realize that we're not invincible.
Yep. I realized that my first time trying to skateboard, so not a good situation.
I'd like to see that. Yeah, so let's jump into Jeff. Why did you pick this film?
Film is Return of the Living Dead. The easy reason is just that it's one of my all-time favorite movies, and I think that it is probably the best horror comedy that's ever been made. If you define it as more horror than comedy, it's like I prefer Shaun of the Dead, but Shaun of the Dead is pretty much straight comedy, whereas Return of the Living Dead is more a horror film with lots and lots of humor in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's about as good as you can get the balance. You know, it's a really laugh out loud, funny movie that is also scary and disturbing, and you know, completely works on both levels. So just, you know, the fact that it's one of my favorite movies was part of it. Also, you know, I will probably go on at length during this podcast about how it doesn't, you know, it's a highly rated movie. You know, it's not underrated. It's a movie that most horror fans have seen, most horror fans really like. You know, it has a very good reputation, but it doesn't get credit for how insanely innovative it is. Lots of stuff that you take for granted came from Return of the Living Dead. It's done. There's all kinds of stuff in there that is part of, you know, zombie movie language that came specifically from that movie. So it was a really influential movie that doesn't get the credit it deserves.
I think that's actually a great place to start. Would you like to? I mean, obviously, brains. That's the big one that immediately comes to mind. But would you like to break down some of the stuff that came from this?
Well, the brains is, you know, that's the big one because you think, oh, zombies eat brains. But what happened when this movie came out is they were trying to mess with zombie lore because the whole premise, and you know, we're also getting into how it was a meta movie before Scream, and it's not as, you know, permeating as Scream is. It's not all about the meta aspect, but that's the launching point is, hey, Night of the Living Dead 1968 movie actually happened. What the events of that movie are true, but when George Romero made the movie, to avoid getting sued, he had to change everything. So you start from the idea that zombies are real. They kept it hidden. It was concealed. They made a movie about it, but they changed everything. So that gives Return of the Living Dead permission to break all the rules. So the characters initially think it's going to follow the rules. And so you kill the dead by, you know, bashing the brain or severing the head. And that doesn't work. So that's the first realization in that great moment where, you mean the movie lied? And
yeah.
So the rules don't apply. So then they, instead of eating human flesh, which was what it was up to that point, you know, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, they just, you know, rip your guts out and start munching on those. This one specifically said, we're going to eat your brains, which was a cool idea, which then became part of zombie lore. Now, what do zombies eat? They eat your brains. That is specifically Return of the Living Dead's idea that was so influential that it's everywhere. So, that was the big one. There was the meta one, fast zombies. It's like, what was the first movie to have fast zombies? People will say 28 Days Later or
Oh no,
Dawn of the Dead remake. It's like, no, this was the one where zombies could move and run at a normal pace, and they can talk, and they at times behave intelligently. So it kind of, all the stuff that you think came later, fast zombies, talking zombies, all those rules were broken and then became influential just from Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah, I thought the talking and the being intelligent was such a nice change. So this wasn't the first time I saw it, but I thought that it was going in. And then once I was watching it, I remembered seeing it when I was way younger, but for some reason I haven't watched it since then. I will say straight out, this immediately went to like my top 2. I would have to see it a few more times to determine if it was my favorite, but it's definitely up there now. But I loved the intelligence and like calling for more paramedics and police. Yeah. Amazing. Mm-hmm. The one that's dressed like, I mean, I assume he was a cop, but like flagging down the cop cars and all of that stuff was just so great. But I really was more creeped out by these zombies than usual. And when you look at it as a horror comedy, and this is the one that creeped me out more, that's a really huge compliment coming from me. The woman that's cut in half and talking to them about why they eat brains was like a life-changing scene for me. Like that was just fucking phenomenal. So I really appreciated this, and I wish that zombies were maybe not often, but I'd like to see more intelligent zombies like this. I thought it was a great thing.
Yeah, it's definitely creepy, and a lot of that is, a lot of it is the, mythos of these zombies, where it's a horrible process, and being a zombie is pure agony unless you're eating brains. But it's also that the characters are so likable in this, even though they're not. They're not all great people. They argue, they, panic, they do this. But, the whole first scene, you've got about 10 minutes of, the two main guys who turn into zombies. I wrote it down all the names so I wouldn't go blank like this. So Freddie and Frank. So, they're the ones who get gassed at the beginning, slowly turn into zombies. But in that 10 minutes, which, it's a horror film that starts off with 10 minutes of exposition.
Right.
It's brilliant. It's
one
of the best parts of the movie, but all it is them talking and delivering exposition to the audience, setting stuff up that all, pretty much everything they do pays off. But it's just them talking for the first 10 minutes, and it's amazing, and you really, really like these guys. So when, horrible stuff starts to happen, you're way more invested in it than you would normally be in a cheesy, low-budget horror film. And so, the zombies, you have really good zombie design on Tarman, and you have really good zombie design on the half one, but the other zombies aren't particularly great. That's where you can see the low budget. Mm-hmm. They're not spectacular zombies, but they're scary because you're so invested in these characters. You want people to get out of this situation. So they come off as scarier than they normally would be, even though the makeup really is pretty shoddy aside from the two main zombies.
Well, I was actually thinking about why they come off more terrifying to me. And a lot of it comes from that opening scene. Because, take the stairs, for example. When he's like, watch this stair, that's coming back.
Yeah.
And if she had just run up the stairs and one broke, and we'll accept it. Like, that's a horror movie. But we're going to be like, When she's running towards the stairs, and we know that stair is fucked up there. Like, it's instant tension, and it's so well done. And then, of course, it pays off as well, because she doesn't fall all the way through instantly. Everything about the stairs is even great, but it comes back to that exposition at the beginning. but the exposition also didn't feel that forced to me. Like the conversations felt natural, and it just really, really worked. I was so impressed with the writing in this.
Yeah, well, that's why the movie. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
That's why the movie holds up so well. Because to me, a lot of movies you look at and you say, you know what, I enjoyed it in the 80s. I still love it now, but it's through the filter of nostalgia. Mm-hmm. And this one completely holds up. This one you can watch for the first time, and it feels contemporary because the writing is so good and the acting is so good. And so you can have a scene that is two characters talking for 10 minutes, and it's thoroughly gripping just because it is so well written and so well acted. So it is a timeless movie.
And then the idea that the pieces of a zombie all keep going. That was terrifying in and of itself. I don't know why that's not bigger in the genre right now. We have so much zombie stuff, and I feel like it's just repetitive, like to the point that we all worship Train to Busan because it dared to be different. I feel like zombie films, when we have this many happening at once, or zombie stories, it's weird to me that we don't get more totally different stuff with it. And what I was thinking about with that is this is so old that it should have influenced people making stuff now to go, look, we can do something totally different. It's not like it's never worked before. And I thought that was kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's a movie that has, nonstop great ideas. I mean, there are no slow parts in this movie.
No.
It is all, is just one great moment after another, and lots of, really memorable scenes. You've got the half zombie, you've got Tarman. Either one of those would have been enough for one movie, but you've got both of them. It is a very packed with ideas movie. And so, it's from a screenwriting standpoint, it would be a challenging one, to keep up that pace, keep up that level of innovation. And when you have zombies that basically can't be killed except to throw them in a crematorium, that's a writing challenge. How do you get out of that? Mm-hmm. So as far as, using those types of zombies, I think it's probably, okay, that's cool, but how do I get 90 minutes of script out of, zombies that can't be destroyed? It's, so I think it's probably too daunting to do those. It's easier if you can just shoot them in the head and mow them down and, get your characters out of it that way.
Absolutely. But I mean, I even look at like Freddie and Frank, right? And they have such a cool thing going on with how they become literally the living dead in front of our eyes. And I never see other stuff like that. Maybe I'm not watching the right stuff, but that's a great concept. And I can't believe that it's not used more. Or just such little things, like not even little things. I don't know why I called it little things, but like when they put the zombie in the crematorium and that's how it spreads, that was amazing. And yet it's so simplistic and it makes such sense. And I feel like a lot of times they go so overboard coming up with some crazy ass reason for stuff to happen. And this just felt so logical and, for lack of a better term, like it could really happen. It was very interesting to me.
Well, it did really happen. They've got the whole.
That's a fine point you make.
That's another way. I don't know that it was influential. I don't know that, but before Fargo, because Fargo has that whole thing. It's based on a true story. Right. It's not. It's just to be funny. And that's what this one does. It opens, in 1984 saying this movie is based on a true story. All the character names are real. All the places are real. This is, a documentary that you're watching. Of course, it's not, and no one believes it is, but it's just this funny little bit at the very beginning of the movie. It's like, oh, wow, I didn't expect it to start that way. That's kind of fun.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm sure the people in Louisville, Kentucky were very confused when they saw this. Like, when did this happen?
That's the only thing that was changed.
If you guys don't mind, we can start at the beginning where they do kind of lay the groundwork for this film, where you've got Freddie and Frank, or you've got Freddie being trained on this new job that he's taking, right? And Frank is showing him around, and it's already a creepy. Medical supply stuff is kind of creepy, especially when you get to the half dogs. You're seeing all this
I
stuff,
loved
and
that.
yeah, and he's a young guy. I mean, I'm assuming he's 18, 19, might be 16, but anyway, he's a teen or maybe even early 20s, and he's checking all this stuff out, and the way that Frank is doing, it's like a kid in a candy store. He's like, "Oh, check this skeleton out. Oh, wait, by the way, we get them from India, and they all have perfect teeth. When have you ever known somebody have perfect teeth? I think they got skeleton farms." So everything that Frank hits you or strikes you as that guy that heard something from somebody that heard it from somebody else, and he's accepted it as true. It's got to be skeleton farms out there. That's what's going on. Oh, by the way, did you remember that story that was a movie, but it actually wasn't a movie? It's actually true. You know how I know? We've got one in the basement. Which, when you find that out, you start questioning, like, well, maybe all this other shit he's talking about is true. But what's great about that whole setup to where he's teaching Freddy this job and how to do this job, they go down there, they check out the canister. Freddy makes that comment about about this thing cracking or making sure it doesn't leak, and Frank hits it. He said, "Are you crazy? This thing is made by the Army Corps of Engineers," and slaps it. And of course, all the mist, all the gas comes out because you got two jokes going on right there. One is the durability joke of, "Oh yeah, this thing is solid." You see it a lot of times when somebody's selling a car in a movie, like, "Oh, this bumper won't fall off," and they hit it and the bumper, of course, falls off, or the door falls off, something like that. But then you also have that joke about the Army Corps of Engineers. It's supposed to be this great organization that whatever they build is the gold standard. But we know there are a number of things that they've constructed that, the joke within the military is if you ever see something being advertised as military grade, don't fucking buy it because it's worthless. So anytime you see these trucks saying, "Oh, it's got a military grade truck bed," nope, not buying that truck. It's going to fall apart because that inside joke within the military. Anybody who's been in the military, like, you don't trust anything that comes from the military. It's not going to last.
Yeah, and it's set up before he even hits the thing. Where how did it get here? Typical Army fuck up.
Yeah,
right off the bat.
I thought that was a nice touch, like just admitting that the Army fucks things up and then putting your faith into it. Beautiful foreshadowing.
Well, not even that. Like, my question is, if this is down here, and this goes back just to the start of the film, the start of this problem. It's there. You don't call somebody. You don't let anybody know. It's this whole thing of like, oh, well, it's this cool thing that we can tell, any random people that happen to show up here. And apparently you're the first person I've told because this thing is covered in dust. But, we're not going to bother telling the Army that we have some top secret shit here that can probably get us all thrown into jail.
Well, they explain it once Bert shows up because Bert is screaming at him, and they're like, "Well, maybe we should call them." Like, no, we can't have people poking around here. There are a few hints that I noticed when I was watching it today where they're not a above the line organization. They probably cooked the books. There's probably stuff there they shouldn't have. So it's like the military coming in and saying, "How did you get these?" They don't want, well, what else might you have?
Right.
So they kind of explain why they would have it down there and not, they're not the most trustworthy, medical supply shop you can go to. So,
they're definitely shady dudes.
I mean, you can tell that by the name of the place.
Yeah, Unita. It cracks me up every time I watch this movie. And I was telling James earlier, I watch this movie probably at least once a year. At least once a year over the last 10 or 15 years. Because I saw it back in the 80s as a kid and, watched it a few more times during the 90s with relatives who wanted to see it, kind of I mean, as a kid, it was scary. As an adult, there's some creepy elements, but there's so much more humor, or at least you identify with so much more of the humor than you do the fright and the fear of the film.
Yep. Well, I always liked it. I saw it in the 80s. And, it was always a movie that I really liked, but it wasn't until I was an adult and I watched like, no, this is one of the best horror films ever. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't watch it every year, but whenever I watch it as an adult, this movie is a masterpiece. It holds up completely well. It's just everything about it, I think, works.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And like I said, I don't watch it a lot. I've probably seen it twice in my entire life. But so I kind of view it as this was my first viewing, even though I've seen it before, because it's been so long. And I will absolutely say that it holds up. I was more interested in this than a lot of stuff that drops today. And it wasn't just the humor, but what the humor does is, like you were talking about earlier, it really makes these characters relatable. And that is what builds the empathy for them so that when they're attacked, we care. And I feel like horror comedies get written off sometimes because people are like, that's not horror or whatever. And this is something I'm going to use as an example constantly of how to write horror. Because when you have that empathy and you care about the character, the horror matters. And so what I'm saying is don't write this off just because it's a horror comedy.
Yeah, well, the characters really are extremely well set up in those first scenes because, they're working late and, Freddy's a kid. Frank is, working this job, but Frank is, he is enthusiastic about his job. He likes it. He's having fun training the kid. He's not, oh God, I have to train this bratty teenager. He's not, oh geez, I'm working late on 4th of July weekend. He enjoys his job. You assume that on a normal non-zombie day, he's good at his job and he, puts all his effort into it. And Freddy is, he's happy to be there. He would probably rather be partying with his friends, but he's there to learn. He's taking it seriously, which is why there's this one throwaway line, because generally it is Frank making all the jokes, but then he shows him the split dog, and, it's a split dog, and Ray has that little moment where he just sort of growls at it, and there's a throwaway line where it's like, stop goofing off, kid. You're learning.
Right.
Just this funny little moment where it's like, no, I get to goof off, but you pay attention to the wisdom I'm imparting upon you. But they're not downbeat characters. They're guys who they're there to do a job. They're going to enjoy it. They're going to do a good job. He's going to train this kid well. The kid is going to learn well. And so by the time the opening credits start, we're completely on their side. And then of course it's the awful fates.
And that's what makes their deaths, I guess, so good. Like, we do care about them, and they manage to do it that quickly. A lot of opening horror deaths or slasher deaths, we don't care. We're like, you're this screaming woman that's trying to run away. That's everything we know about you. And what I like about this, though, is they're not the only ones that use this same way of doing exposition to gain empathy and impart knowledge on the audience. The Mortician does it as well. So, like, I feel like Frank is a person who hasn't had somebody to talk to a lot. Or if he has, like, whoever had Freddy's job before him has been there just as long and doesn't want to fucking hear it. Right? So, like, Frank's excited to tell him all this stuff. And then you see the Mortician, and the Mortician does the same thing when, what's his name, Bert? Comes in. And the Mortician does the same thing. He's like, watch this. You can break up rigor mortis. And he's like showing him how it's done, right? But it's really impactful for later. It's to give that audience that piece of info to make these things matter later. But it goes back to what I was saying about it not feeling forced. Like, this Mortician doesn't get to talk to people. He doesn't get to show people this. And now his buddy's there who he can trust. So it's not like some random kid is coming in and he's just showing him this. Like, it's some guy he gets to actually do this with. And I think that that's such an effective way of writing to impart that that foreshadowing and knowledge, as well as just like really add to the relationships between the characters.
Yes, absolutely. And also the punks, because in a more superficial movie, the punks would be the bad guys. It's like, the normal characters are the ones we relate to, and then the punks are, the obnoxious jerks that we don't like. But even, Suicide is the least likable one, but you understand his perspective because, he's the most hardcore punk and the others are a little bit intimidated by him and don't like him that much, but he's the guy with the car. And he's aware that if he didn't have a car, they wouldn't be hanging out with him. So he's not a lovable character, but you see where he's coming from. And pretty much, all the punk characters are, they have depth, and it's not, the competent, normal people, adults, and the obnoxious idiot kids. Ultimately, Frank is the one who completely falls apart in one of the funniest performances ever. As soon as things go wrong, Frank has, he can't handle anything. He's just this blubbering mess. But, on the punk side, Spider, the black guy, he's as competent as the competent characters. Although, everyone hits their breaking point at some point in the movie. It's not a movie where, there aren't any real, superheroes. They always, at some point, the stress of the situation hits every single character.
But it does it in different ways to different people, and I really appreciated that as well.
Right.
I thought that was a great touch. Building off what you just said, Suicide was actually extremely interesting to me because I liked how defensive he is. Like, he knows, like you said, that he doesn't really fit in with this group, and he clearly wants friends, but then everything about him is also about rebellion and not needing other people.
Right.
But like, just the little times where he kind of snaps and he's like, you think this is a costume? Or like, or when he basically directly asks them, like, would you even hang out with me if I didn't have a car? But the one that really got me was when Trash is naked grinding on him, and he's just like, hey, have some respect for the dead. Like, that, it's funny, and it's such a great character building moment because he's obviously cares about something, and I thought that was really great because normally that would just lead to a sex scene, and I thought it was a really cool way to really add to these characters with it.
Yeah. And what's kind of funny is when you watch the behind the scenes stuff, the guy who played Suicide was the nicest guy ever. He was like never not in a good mood, just the most cheerful person. Then cameras turn on, angry punk. Cameras turn off, happy, loving life. So
that's the best kind.
Going through the character lists, they're not every single character is an Academy Award winning writing feat, but of course Trash is a interesting character.
We actually met Quigley at a con last year. We were doing a convention in Riverside, California, and she was there. So we hung out with her for breakfast a couple times and things like that. And my buddy Brian Haas was there, and he's just a huge fan of her anyway. But she was just like the most laid back, coolest person, and just willing to just talk about anything. And just like, you're just like immediately family when you talk to her, And that was it was a really cool experience.
Cool. Yeah, I've never met her. I've been to a bunch of horror conventions where she's there, but I've never actually met her at them.
All right, moving forward. Don, what's next?
Well, here's what at least worked for me. I mean, one of the things I liked about this film, and still like, and I guess appreciate even more about the film, is that it's not like a lot of the other zombie movies where you see this dissension between the humans versus the zombie, or dissension between the humans that are trying to survive the zombie apocalypse or zombie attacks. They are working together, and they're all trying to work together for survival. The only arguments that come up are, when not Frank, when Bert goes back to the medical supply place and he's kind of pissed off that, oh my God, it's such a mess. You guys did this. Oh, what'd you do here? It's kind of that's probably about it. Or just the idea about driving and Spider's character is like, nope, the cars are all gone, and you see like this flame burst out. But there's no conflict that really arises between any of the humans, living humans, that makes it seem as though they have to fight against each other or outlast each other, which is what you see in a lot of other films. This one's about clearly making it about the living versus the dead, or living versus the living dead, to the point where you have people who on any given day would not associate with each other. I mean, Freddy is the link between these two groups. And he's also, he's living and he's living dead, which, you got, a couple other things going on there. But it allows us to see it from different perspectives as far as the guy who's used to being around death for many different ways, because there's some, I guess, some pretty reinforced theories about Ernie being a Nazi because of the way the crematorium is decorated and the music he's listening to and the pipe that he's smoking.
Yeah. Apparently, Dan O'Bannon has confirmed that, yes, that was the intended backstory.
Yeah, and there's like a picture of Ava Braun in one of the in one of the backgrounds on one of the walls. Hitler. He speaks German at one point and actually refers to, I guess, some German song or German story talking about the night and saying like, oh, it's a drunken soldier, but he says it in German. But there are all these things going on, and I was reading up on this, and the director O'Bannon stated that they were supposed to explicitly make it to where he says something. So we don't know what the favor is, which makes us all speculate, kind of like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction as far as what's in there. What is the favor that he would have wanted? Like, oh, get me to Argentina. It's like, what was the favor going to be if they got out of this?
Because ultimately the favor he asked for is, watch yourself out there. But yeah, he would have asked for something much worse had they solved their problem.
Yeah, because I can completely see Bert knowing that this guy was a Nazi, or knowing that was part of his past, but not wanting to come to grips with it, or at least really confront him about it, despite all the signs. But no, I like that you're starting to see these different parts of America at this time period coming together at this point. You see them go in their different directions, but they're all having the same struggle.
Right.
I didn't know anything about this Nazi stuff, so this is fascinating to me.
Oh, yeah. Ernie, like every time I watch it, I see something new. So he's holding the gun he has is a Walther 38. God, what else? He has like the same name as a
his name is slightly different from a prominent Nazi.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Of course, watching it in the 80s, I never came close to picking up on that. But now when you watch it, knowing about it, there's all kinds of stuff. And they did confirm that is, there's no point where they say, hey, Ernie, you a Nazi? But they, it was intended that way. That is
not anymore.
So.
But the half zombie, the zombie that they cut in half, the one that reveals why they eat brains, or at least why they're doing what they're doing, right? There's even at least some fan theories about Ernie's reaction to it, and knowing what he had done during the war, or during the Holocaust, knowing what he had done during that period, he has this extra remorse because he's like, oh shit, the dead can feel pain. This idea that, oh, you're killing somebody, you're putting them out of your misery, or you're killing them, you're ending their pain, or you have a painless death, or whatever these things are that we claim. And he's realizing like, oh shit, all these people I probably killed during the war or killed in the camps, they're still suffering. Which, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, that's really deep. Wow. So much for a horror comedy.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. I kind of wish I would have known that before I before I watched it now, so I could have watched for that.
Watch it
I'm gonna
again,
have to.
and you will see how he changes a few times. Like even the point where he's thinking about, oh God, I forgot her name.
Tina.
Tina. When he's about to kill Tina, he was pointing the gun at her, and he's like having this moment of struggling, like, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? What is it actually going to do? And he's even pointing the gun at her at the end of the film when Freddy breaks through the attic. So it's unclear as to, was he going to put her out of her misery, or was he holding her hostage? It's like there's so much going on to where is he actually trying to save her, or is this one of these things of, there's a bear in the woods, it's you and me, all I have to do is outrun you, I don't have to outrun the bear.
Weird. See, that's something I never would have picked up on. My assumption was always that he was going to put her out of her misery, kill her before the zombie breaks through and devours her.
My thing is, like, with a lot of these films, like, why wouldn't you, not that I'm endorsing this, but why wouldn't you, if you're worried about the zombie getting to you and him being who he is, why not just follow his Fuhrer and just go ahead and put one in his head?
Well, I mean, at this point he wouldn't, because he knows that the dead can feel. So he's going to want to keep living. But yeah.
Well, that's only when you're reanimated, though. It's the reanimated dead that can feel pain.
True. I don't know.
That damn rigor mortis.
Yeah.
Damn you, rigor mortis.
And I did look up some information after I watched the film again. They actually ate real brain, or extras. Some of the extras ate real brains in the film, but they were calf brain and maybe other kind of livestock. But I think it was just pig and calf, I think is what it was, or cow.
Interesting.
Brain.
Huh.
Yeah. And the director went so far as to, which I respect this, I'm not going to ask the extras to do anything on my film that I'm not willing to do. So he ate brains as well.
Well, alrighty then. I want to go back to
so much.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, because I think it's one of the reasons I like this so much, and I didn't notice it until you pointed it out. You said that it's always the living versus the living dead.
Mm-hmm.
And while I love the governor in The Walking Dead, I don't like that so many zombie movies become about humans fighting. I think it's 100% accurate. I think it's exactly what would really fucking happen. But it doesn't interest me because I've seen it too many times. And I hadn't noticed that doesn't really happen here. And we don't get like the mortician pushing her in the way to save himself. And I'm glad we don't get that, because at no point does anybody betray anybody else to do this. And that's really refreshing, even though I didn't notice it till you were talking about it. I really think that it played a part in why I liked this so much.
Yeah, there's a ton of conflict in the movie. I mean, characters are shouting at each other through the whole movie, but they always have the same end goal. You never see, you can never sense Dan O'Bannon and say, okay, what kind of conflict can I do to artificially extend the drama? It's, if you're in this bad of a situation and it's people you don't know, you're going to be bickering a lot. But it's not the Night of the Living Dead, stay in the cellar. No, we need to stay up here. No, down in the cellar. No, up here. Where it's a movie-long conflict. This one, they all are pretty much on the same page for what to do. Part of it is because a lot of the characters are, Bert, what do we do? What do we do, Bert? What do we do? Because Frank has no clue what to do. But so they are at common goals, and the characters, they aren't they're scared, but they're not cowardly. So like the end bit where Bert and Spider drive off without them, it's clearly set up that they were going to go back. They try to go back, they crash through the gate, but they're overwhelmed. It's Spider screaming at him, we have to go back. But Bert makes the very good point, they would have turned the car over. And we see this very clearly. They made a good faith effort to stick to the plan to get them in the car now there, and it didn't work. It would not, they would both be dead. So they drive off. And I can't think of any instances in the entire movie where the characters behave in a selfish, cowardly way. They always, they fight the whole time, but they're always have each other's backs, and they're always working together to try to get out of this situation.
Yeah, and that's even true, like, when the mortician doesn't know them yet. When they're outside, he doesn't have to let them in. And he takes mercy on them and lets them into the house. He could have left them out there to be food.
Yep.
So yeah, I like that's consistent throughout. And it kind of goes back to what I was just saying about where I don't think that that's what humans would really do. But it's what I'd like humans to do in this situation. Just like I'd like them to do it if there was ever like a global pandemic that was killing hundreds of thousands of people and all they had to do was put a piece of cloth over their face. But,
well, you bring that up. you bring that up, and I will make a connection, because this is normally when I would make a snarky remark myself. But going back and looking at this film coming out in the 80s and where we are in 2020, I mean, there are a good number of conspiracies that are dealt with in this film, as far as popular conspiracies about, the government, they'll cover up anything if they fuck up because they don't want people to know what's going on. They don't want people to panic. Oh, we discovered aliens. We're not going to tell them. Or, we're dumping toxic waste in this area. We're not going to tell them. The likelihood of that stuff, yeah, it may happen, but the likelihood of it happening is so much less than people actually think. I mean, if they want to poison people, I mean, you just do it the way that they did in Flint, where it's, we'll try and pretend that we're doing something good, or the syphilis experiments. There are these things that are going on, but the conspiracies that are brought up in the film, or at least alluded to in the film, are so wacky and so out there that someone who's watching this film now, with whatever conspiracies that they believe and follow, about, Dr. Fauci has invested in these companies to create the COVID virus, but then he's also creating the COVID vaccine. So he's telling people to do X, Y, and Z so he can make money off of this thing. If the virus were as, I guess, as dangerous as you're claiming that they created the virus to be, then why are they saying simple solutions are physical distance, cloth over your face, wash your hands? Because if I were going to create a global pandemic, I mean, a human-made one, an engineered one, I'm going to make it a whole lot deadlier. I mean, it's not going to be a simple fix like follow these rules to protect yourself and other people. Because it doesn't sound like he can make a lot of money off of that unless a lot of you die.
Yep.
It's just weird to me. And my point was solely, I would just like to believe that this is possible, that people would care and want to help each other. And I don't know, I'm a pretty jaded. Yeah, I'm a pretty jaded individual, so I don't know that I believe it. But man, it was nice to see it. And like I said, I hadn't really noticed when I was watching it how much I liked that. But talking about it now, like, it's almost like really hopeful compared to a lot of zombie movies in that way.
Well, to bring it, or at least bring other zombie movies in without mentioning them by name. The one thing, again, as I get older, as I watch this, year after year, I didn't see societal conflict in this one. And by that, I mean, there wasn't the insulting because of age, race, gender, sexual orientation, other than the ones that you might have already had, like with the group of friends where, I forget the one guy's name, where he's trying to get with the girl and she says, I don't like you that way. I bet you'd like to get with me. You don't see anything. Yes, you don't see anything that takes place once the zombies hit to where these people want to divide themselves, aside from living versus living dead. So there's not a moment like in other movies where it's, it's the black guy or Hispanic guy or the white guy or the woman or whatever. There's none of that gets brought in the film like you see in other ones. So there is that other hopeful message there, which is also weird for an 80s movie, that that there isn't a hint of that.
Yeah, well, like I said, you've got the two major groups. You've got the punks And then you've got the like, quote unquote normal people, but there's a mixture, in those groups. You've got, Spider is the very competent one. He is the one who, had there been a different action at the very end, probably would have survived. And Bert is the competent one. But Frank, Bert, old white guy. Frank, old white guy. Bert handles everything, and Frank falls apart immediately and remains falling apart the entire movie. He can't handle anything. So, yeah, it's, of the punks, you've got some of them who handle the situation well and some of them who don't. And there's no, societal categories in that. It's pretty much just, these are different characters. They're well-rounded characters. Some of them are good in the zombie apocalypse. Some of them are not as equipped to handle it.
I would definitely not be good. You don't want me involved in your zombie fighting party.
All right, noted.
I'm the guy you want to push down and keep going.
Well, James, I hate to break it to you, but I'm gonna make sure that you make it. Okay, even if I have to put you in the shed in the garden and come out there and play video games with you.
Yes. I'm really bad at video games, so you'll enjoy that.
Doesn't matter.
Unless we're and maybe if we're breaking out like Donkey Kong and Miss Pac-Man, I'll be all right.
Or Donkey Kong. So the two of you brought this up, and I had it in my notes, and I actually talked to you about it, James, earlier. The consciousness of the zombies is a great added feature. And again, as you were saying, Jeff, this movie is way ahead of its time with redefining the zombie genre and then rewriting the rules, or at least, taking the rules that were there and expanding upon them to where we now have sentient, conscious, critically thinking zombies. I love how it's not an issue of, oh my gosh, it's not the squirrel thing where they see, a living person and, oh, I have to go after them. It's, oh, well, we only got a couple of paramedics here. Oh shit, there's a radio. Send more paramedics. It's like it's like they're calling for Uber Eats. It's so fucking awesome the way that this happens, where they're calling for takeout.
Yeah, I mean, send more paramedics is one of the classic lines in the horror cinema, and it's so good because it's hilariously funny because you don't expect it, but it is a genius plan. Like, that's, if you're a zombie and you wanted another meal, send more paramedics is the way to go about it. It's a simple plan. It's an effective plan, but the fact that it's coming from a zombie, we don't expect to see that, and the line is absolutely hilarious, but also, brilliant.
I like that. Even their plan, like when the paramedics arrive, the way that they all hide.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, all this stuff that takes place off screen is actually really interesting to me because this isn't a side of zombies that we get. And again, that intelligence makes them so much more terrifying to me. The fact that they could think this out. Like, I'm not going to be able to dress myself in zombie droppings or whatever the fuck you want to call it and walk through the crowd like you see in some films. These guys are going to be like, wipe, and then eat me. So...
Well, it lets them get rid of a typical horror cliche, because one of my notes was, nothing can save you. Typically, in a horror film, you have to deal with the problem of the police, which is why you set them in cabins out in the woods or, whatever. This one, the paramedics show up. The police show up. Lots of police show up. The helicopter shows up. The authorities are trying to solve the problem, but, they're not prepared for zombies to be hiding just out of sight and to come at them as a group. So the fact that the zombies are intelligent and able to plan gives the movie the more refreshing thing where it feels more believable because, why don't they just call the police? They did call the police. The police came. Why don't they just call, if these guys are sick, just, send in the paramedics. They did. It didn't work. So you've got the characters doing the things you would do. In fact, speaking of selfless characters, Bert establishes if the army or the police come to investigate, if they go through his stuff, he's screwed. He's very clear about this. He's like, here's what's going to happen to me. I'm going to jail. if this gets out. But once, Frank and Freddie are really, truly sick, he's like, well, I'm taking these guys to the emergency room. This is bad for me, but I'm not going to let these guys die. And so, the movie constantly has the characters making the decision that you sit in the theater during a slasher film and say, well, why don't they just do this? Mm-hmm. If Jason is out there killing people, why doesn't someone go out, grab a payphone, call the police? In this case, they want to get out of the area. They're not staying at Camp Crystal Lake. They call the police multiple times. They call the parent. They do all the stuff that you should do in a normal horror movie, but don't because it's too difficult for the screenwriter to keep the story going. And I can say, as a novelist, that the police are a pain when you're trying to. Okay, well, why didn't they call the police? Oh, damn it, I don't know. So the fact that they do in this movie, it adds to the feeling of believability, and then that's why it's scarier and more engaging than most horror movies, because you're like, yeah, this is what I would do in this situation.
Well, even like my most recent work that my beta readers are reading right now, the police are involved, but I kind of put them off a little bit, right? And everybody called me on it. Every person that's responded so far has been like, the police would be involved right away. You can't do this. And I was like, you guys are absolutely right. Like, I didn't do it purposely. Like, that's just when they showed up in my head, but it's literally way too late. It's like 4 hours after they would be involved. And I'm looking at rewrites and I'm like, shit, I have to put them in. And that really fucks some stuff up. Yeah. And when you say the police are a pain in the ass for a horror writer, my God, they're, yeah, definitely.
Look, as you said that, I was thinking about the project I was working on, and I was telling James about it, where the whole thing was something happens and I had to figure out how to prevent them without doing the cliches of, oh, they don't have cell phone coverage. Oh, they don't have this. There's so many more complications now as opposed to when this film was made, where, yeah, it does become harder to do that. But I mean, it's just wonderful the way that they did it. And I think even the way things are now, I think the setup of having at least the way this story works would still work if this were remade. I'm not calling for it to be remade, but if it were made in a 2020 setting, we called because even Frank himself, and that's the part that pisses. I'm sorry, Bert himself is obviously that asshole business owner who's sitting there. He's got 2 employees that are sick. He knows what did it. And the paramedics ask him, like, well, what were they poisoned with? Something, some chemical. I don't know. Some chemical. Knowing that the paramedics need to know what it is in order to save them. But he's just kind of like, no, fuck you guys. I'm not going to jail.
Well, in fairness, it was too late, so I'm on his side.
No, but even then, they didn't know that. But it was still one of those things of, what it was. It was that dioxin 245, trioxin 245. And what was wild, because I thought about another theory, conspiracy theory that had come up, because they said that the trioxin 245 was for spraying marijuana. It was for spraying marijuana. Now, I remember in the movie Platoon, they talked about some of the conspiracy theories that some of the soldiers believed in, which was, oh man, the Vietnamese, they're spraying the weed with chemicals that'll, make you lose your mind or make your dick to where it won't work. And you see this one guy, one of the soul brothers who's lighting up, like look at his weed and like puts it down because he's like, nah, I want my shit to work. This idea that it was going to make you mindless but more importantly, it was going to make you impotent.
Yeah, you can't have that.
No.
I mean, I think in this case, Bert, it's such good characterization because it really shows how far he comes as it goes, Like, yeah, he should do the right thing here, but it's also very believable why he doesn't.
Right.
And I feel like it means more later that he's more willing to help everybody when he sees how bad it is. And it would be a little weird if he just instantly was like, let me tell you everything.
Yeah. Like the paramedics are there. They've got, he's told them it's poison. They breathed in some gas. You assume that if the scene continued and they said, look, we really need to know, we can't figure this out. We need to know what they breathed to save their lives. He would have said, okay, let me take you down to these barrels. But in that moment, you don't do the full confession. You give them as little information as you can. He's not stupid. He's going to, self-preservation until it's going, until it can't happen anymore.
Yeah, Tucker and Dale taught us that.
Out of his hands.
Tucker and Dale taught us how to talk to the cops, Don.
As nervously as possible.
Man. Another thing I really like is talking about the police this way. I like that they just show that it doesn't matter if the police come.
Right.
Like, go ahead, bring them in. In fact, bring more. And I feel like that's so much stronger than trying to write them off. And I feel like I might have to examine that in my works going forward whenever possible, because it really adds to the threat level. The one group that's supposed to come protect you in this situation can't. Mm-hmm. And they try. And if fucking cops can't do it, what's Freddy gonna? Well, not Freddy, but what's Suicide gonna do? Like, I really like how it just really shows there's nothing anyone can do.
Right.
And I love that.
Cops aren't stupid. The cops, they send one group out, they investigate, they have no reason to think that they can't get out of the car. And then, they up their game immediately. The next time cops are coming, it's a whole line of police cars. Who would never imagine that zombies would come on both sides of them? Plus, they've got a helicopter. It's a movie where the authorities are taking the threat seriously. Yep. They can't do anything about it, but they are, they're trying to solve the problem and they're being intelligent about it. They just don't have the information that they would need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of great that they're not portrayed unintelligently. Everybody's really, everybody in this film is really bringing their A game as much as they can. And that really adds to the stakes and makes everything so much better than some inept asshole trying to get through. My one caveat to that might be trash, but, I think she tries. So
I love trash because you see a complete change. I mean, obviously, when she becomes a zombie, but you see a complete change from this bravado that she has, where she is this death-obsessed goth punk girl, to where she's speaking in vocal fry or very monotone ways, which is like, oh, I think about the way that could be the worst way to die. Everything that she's saying is just dark and ominous and creepy. And then when it starts to rain and, she's naked before, she starts to talk about how the rain is burning her, you see how she's freaking out. She's like, oh my God, I need a blanket. It's cold and I'm wet. I need it. You see her completely change. You realize, like, that fucking costume came off. That costume, that mask that you had just came off. You're trying to fit in. Just like when Suicide was trying to figure out why he doesn't fit in, even though he doesn't want to fit in, why he doesn't fit in, you're making an extra effort to put on an act for people so you can fit in, but you really don't.
Yep. Well, also, when he shoves, you assume that, she's putting on an act and she puts it on all the time. They're used to it, because it's when she takes off her shirt, he says, oh, get some lights over here, trash, take off her clothes again. Yeah. So she does it. You kind of assume that when she's grinding against Suicide, that's not new behavior for her. So, he's able to, when he shoves her away, he probably also knows that it wasn't going to go further than that.
Right.
But yeah, she is definitely a character who is playing the role of the monotone goth chick. And then, she, as soon as things get bad, she falls apart and the mask falls off.
I would have liked to have seen Trash like survive at least. I mean, but there's a foreshadowing as far as what's going to happen to her because she talks about what would be the worst death. But I would have loved to have seen how she would have dealt with this whole situation. I mean, we see how Suicide does. I mean, he goes, hard charging right in, and the canister zombie is hiding behind a curtain, and he doesn't have a chance to go any further. But you see how he's responding to this crisis, like, oh shit, let's go get her. Like, he's all for, saving his friends, or at least, trying to save them. Whereas I would have loved to have seen anybody else's, especially like Trash, somebody who is lost early, how they would have responded. I mean, how would Freddie have responded if it had just been Frank who had ingested the gas, and how's Freddie going to deal with this, or at least help, or vice versa?
Yep.
I really like their names as well. Like Suicide, especially because he dies, obviously not suicide, but he dies a hero in many ways. Mm-hmm. Like, he is the one that's willing to be courageous and charge over there. I think that's so interesting how the goth names really play into that juxtaposition as well. Like Trash, for instance, Trash isn't trash. Like, her friends value her, right? But like, you're the one that chooses this name, and it's a reflection of how you feel about yourself. And Trash is working so hard to get people to care about her, and she's just going about it completely fucking wrong, And I really like their names. That's my point.
Yeah, Trash's original name was supposed to be Legs.
Really?
Yeah, Trash works so much better.
Huh. I thought a good name for her would be Weird Plastic Cog Piece that makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
Or Obvious Wig.
Well, I read she wanted to shave. They wanted her to shave her head, and she said, "No, I'm a working actress. I can't. I won't be able to work for months if you shave my head." So they put the wig on her. But, and of course, the whole story behind the codpiece is pretty hilarious if you watch the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Do tell.
It was basically just originally a nude scene, but someone from the studio was there on the set, and he's like, "You can't show pubic hair in this movie, so shave her." So the special effects guy very awkwardly had to shave her, and then the guy from the studio is like, "No, it's worse. Now you can see everything. We need a solution."
Did he not take that class about our changing bodies?
Apparently not.
I mean, when you get rid of pubic hair, that doesn't get rid of your sexual organs.
It does not. So I wasn't there. That's the story as told in the behind-the-scenes documentary. And then, so they basically they said, all right, mold something on there. So they molded a codpiece. It was this prosthetic that I think you weren't supposed to be able to tell it was there. You were supposed to assume that she was naked. You just couldn't really see anything because it wasn't a well-lit scene. But when you watch it, you quite clearly see that she's a Barbie doll. And it's a weird moment in a movie that otherwise, is extremely well made. But yeah, the codpiece it's odd. But it just came from the studio guy saying you can't have frontal nudity. I probably, as a director, would have just thrown a thong on her and say, okay, she doesn't completely strip down. But I don't think they thought people would notice it. And actually, I saw the movie. I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw it on VHS, and you can't quite know. It looks like something's a little bit weird, but you can't tell for sure. But then, on DVD and Blu-ray, you see quite clearly that she has no genitalia.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering, because like when I watched it, it was on Amazon Prime high def or whatever. Right. So like, I'm like, well, maybe if you watched it when it came out, you couldn't tell as well. For me, it's like, who's this alien? That's weird. And I had the same thought. I was like, why would you not just give her a thong or give her something to cover a little bit? Like, that would be less distracting to me than this weird thing going on here. But that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. I'm glad to have provided such valuable information.
Indeed. I will be bringing this up at family functions going forward.
Well, the other behind the scenes thing, which is kind of an interesting from a societal standpoint, is Tina, who is the good girl.
Mm-hmm.
She's talking about her audition, and this was in the '80s, and the documentary was, I think, it was maybe 10 years ago. It's not a new documentary, so she tells this as kind of an amusing story. But she was asked to audition, and Dan O'Bannon said, "Well, show up at my house," and she thought, "That's weird. Normally, you audition at an office or whatever." And when she showed up, he had pornography on the TV. And she left. And it's, kind of told as an amusing story. In 2020, that would be the end of his career if you weren't.
Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That would be canceled. Dan O'Bannon, what a freaking creep. But, because of the time frame, it was, it's kind of funny. He was a perv and probably was hoping she would get her part a different way. So
wow. It's weird how these things have always permeated Hollywood, like even Hitchcock or anybody like that, and it's just been like this accepted reality. And like you said, people tell it like it's this funny story. And I don't know, maybe it's that I've spent so many years working in nonprofits helping victims of sexual abuse and different things like that, but it's never been even slightly not weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
And now, of course, we're getting all these Harvey Weinstein stories and whoever else. We don't need to name drop here. Everybody freaking knows. But it's weird how it suddenly has become a noticeable problem. And I find it so strange, because if I heard those stories anywhere else, I'd be like, that's not normal. And not even just now, just like my whole life. And so I don't know. It's so weird to me how it's just kind of becoming a thing in the last few years. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the girl who plays Casey, she's got the blue streaks in her hair. She's got one of the smaller parts. She met Dan O'Bannon because she was a stripper at a place that he liked to go to. And he said, hey, you want to play trash? Or I guess her character would have been Legs at the time, but the character, he offered her Linnea Quigley's role, and she was like, no, I want to be in the movie, but I'm tired of being naked all the time. So if you give me a non-nudity part, I'll do it. But she got the part because he met her at a strip club and thought, hey, she looks good naked. She'll be good as trash. So, yeah, Dan O'Bannon, pretty much the behind-the-scenes documentary is praising his genius, but not so much his personality. But yeah, in 1985, it was the eccentric, little pervy, kind of hard to get along with director, but extremely talented. And in 2020, I don't care if he made Return of the Living Dead one of the greatest movies ever. It can't happen.
Yep.
So he's lucky he made it in '84 and not 21st century, because he would be gone.
Mm-hmm.
And with good reason.
Yeah. Typically, you turn the pornography off before your guest. That is proper etiquette.
It's so weird. But yeah, if somebody says that your audition is at their house, maybe rethink going.
Yeah.
The one question I had, I wrote a few down while I was watching this. With the whole idea of these sentient, aware zombies themselves, it brings up a lot of questions about life and death and the afterlife, things like that. But obviously, if you're a zombie, you're now the living dead, and we talked about this earlier. You have the one half zombie or the cut up zombie that talks about what it's like and what the pain is and why they do what they do. And my question is, why is it that this film was able to have that discussion about zombies and this whole idea of what remains, no pun intended, what remains within the personality of that person or that body that the zombie is assuming or has, do you still retain your personality, your thoughts, your memories, things like that? Whereas we've kind of been taught especially with more recent zombie films in the past 20 years, that zombies are mindless and stupid.
It seems like the rules of Return of the Living Dead are that you retain your personality in the midst of heroin withdrawal.
Okay.
So it's like, it's not, if I were dead as a zombie, I would not be the charming, articulate person on this podcast. I would be I got to get brains. Come on, James, you're going to hook up me some brains, right, Donald? Brains.
You are barking up the wrong tree, buddy. I don't have any of those.
So I think that's,
I like that. I think that's a good explanation.
You only get to talk to one zombie at length, but clearly this is not how she behaved if you talked to her before she was dead. But, they're in agonizing pain. She's willing to have the conversation with him, but she's in pain and she really, really wants to eat his brains. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, I think if you retain your personality under the circumstances of intense drug withdrawal.
Well, I like that even while she's having the conversation, she's trying to get him. Yeah. Like her hand is constantly reaching. And I thought that was another nice subtext of intelligence, because it's not just the ability to talk or the ability to explain what's going on. She's got this devious ulterior motive going on where she's trying to grab him and pull him in. And she occasionally talks a little quieter so that he leans in more. And I thought that was a really cool little thing to throw in there.
Yeah, but also the movie is intelligent enough that it's not a cheap kill. So it's not, come closer. Why? Come closer. I'll tell you my secrets. My ear. Which a lesser movie would have had that moment. But this one, it's subtext, not subtext, but it's subtle. You see what she's trying to do, but he's not going to be dumb enough to fall for it.
And they also don't go out of their way to like hone in on it to drive it home either. It's just subtly there, not subtly, but it's just there. Right. And I think that's really nice touch. Like there's such a good balance of horror and comedy and intelligent writing throughout this whole thing. Like this is the freaking masterclass in how to write this stuff.
I've been watching this movie for, I guess, the past 35 years. And originally, I didn't like the ending. I was like, that's kind of a cop-out. And as time has gone on, I absolutely love the ending.
Oh, yeah, me too. I don't have that problem because, like I said, I haven't watched this a lot. But the ending for me was phenomenal. And it's exactly what I would really expect in this situation, which kind of made it worse. But yeah, go ahead. You want to describe the ending for anyone who hasn't seen it?
Well, the ending is basically every character is in a no-win situation. Mm-hmm. So they're all individually screwed. And it's like, how are they going to get out of that? But what the movie has set up in the scene immediately after the opening credits is that there is a military guy who's on call 24/7. You get the sense that his whole life is devoted to getting this call, an important call. Where are the barrels? And the barrels have a number on them. And finally, at the end of the movie, they get to the barrels, call the number, and then he makes a call, at which point they launch a nuclear missile and blow up, I think, 20 square blocks.
Right.
Obliterating all of our heroes and, in theory, but not actually, destroying the zombie menace. Watching it as a teenager, it's like, that's a cop-out. What happened was Dan O'Bannon couldn't get the characters out of these situations, so he thought, well, let's just nuke them. Watching it as an adult, it's like, no, it's brilliantly set up. In the moment that it happens, you gradually realize where it's going. It's not a dun dun dun. You just kind of get the sinking feeling as they just put the pieces together and you say, oh yeah, I see where this is headed. That's not good. And then, the government takes decisive action. You cannot accuse them. It's not United States coronavirus. They have a plan. It is, they do what they can to solve the problem. Then, of course, you get the ending where it implies that, the explosion sent the gas up into the clouds, starting the rain. So they've made it significantly worse, which is a different element of satire. But they also, they had a plan, and it is a definitive plan. The government takes action to make this problem go away.
This ending works so well for me. I love it.
I just wish, like, for the second or third one, they just had nuclear zombies. They're glowing at night. But yeah, a cool little.
You should write that Return of the Living Dead.
No, another cool thing, which I'm sure Ernie appreciates, that nuclear warhead is shot out of a World War II howitzer tank.
Oh wow!
A World War II German howitzer, obviously. But
that is a detail I did not know.
No, I was looking up all these facts on it when I was putting my notes, and I was like, what? Let me see what else is going on besides Ernie the Nazi and the whole idea that the two friends are named Bert and Ernie. So there's another
Jesus Christ! I didn't even notice that. We've been talking about it this whole time.
Well, I was going to bring it up. I'm like, you mean we've made it an hour and we haven't talked about Bert and Ernie, the joke?
This explains that guy that's named Cookie Monster for no reason. Jeez.
They never say the names sequentially.
Right.
So you can miss it because they say Ernie a lot, they say Bert a lot, but they never say, hey, Bert, Ernie. So you're able to miss it.
And there's no
paying attention to that
story either.
Hey, Ernie, how do I look? Well,
or rubber duckies for that matter. But yeah, just the idea that this is the plan, right? We need to destroy all the evidence of this, but not just the evidence, but the idea of this threat. So it's not covering our asses. It's because Colonel Glover's job was to find, as they referred to him in the chatter, as the Easter eggs. So it was his job to find them, but the contingency plan is if one of those things cracks or there's something that's going on, there's a disturbance, we got to destroy everything there because this is the only way to get rid of them, or at least the believed way that you can get rid of them. But I also love the fact that this starts at a VA hospital. As someone who has gone to his fair share of VA hospitals in the past 12, 13 years, I just find so much humor in that part. This problem started at a VA hospital. Which I love my VA hospitals. Some people don't have very good experiences with them, but I find it more believable that those canisters would have been sitting in a VA hospital and someone would have forgotten about them, as opposed to the Army would have said, "Hey, let's put these on a tractor trailer and ship them across the country." I would just see it as more believable that the fuck are these like I could see a Return of the Living Dead at a VA hospital. Somebody goes into the basement, they see this canister, or in the medical supply area of the hospital, like, what the fuck are these canisters? Oh, if found, call the Army. Well, we're the VA. Who the fuck do we need to call? It doesn't matter. It's the same shit. I can see the way that it breaks down that way. Or just somebody sees it and just doesn't give a damn. But no, I love the ending. As a kid, I had the same kind of feeling as you, Jeff. I didn't like it because I wanted to see what was going to happen next, not just because of the cool, I guess, cliffhanger where we've got the poison or the trioxin going back into the soil, or at least the ashes from the zombies themselves recontaminating the soil. But the idea of, what would happen next?
Yeah. And unfortunately, Return of the Living Dead 2 kind of just ignores that and retells the same basic story.
Yeah.
Hey, do either of you know if it's after midnight when the nukes strike?
It's 5:01 a.m.
So it's the 4th of July? Cool.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just feel bad for anybody who was getting up that morning who might have had to go to work. And they just got out of bed for nothing.
Sleeping.
Yeah.
Sucks. Sad day.
But as Colonel Glover said to whoever he was speaking with, because it might have been the vice president, it might have been the chairman of Joint Chiefs, but obviously was somebody in Washington he was talking to. But the way they pointed out is like, oh yeah, it only destroyed 20 square blocks in Louisville and roughly 4,000 dead.
Yeah.
Which Louisville at this time, even the 80s, I mean, there was a sizable population there. You've got universities there. You've got, it's an urban area. But I find it funny that, it's only 4,000 people.
Well, I love the final line. It was like, no, this hasn't been pleasant for anybody.
Yeah.
No, it certainly hasn't.
But the president will be there. I don't think anything could go wrong.
Oh, boy.
But yeah, I think it's a fantastic ending that it took me a long time to appreciate. But it's like, no, it's the only way it could have honestly ended. And it would have been dumb to have, our heroes speeding off the 20 blocks before the nuclear explosion hits. It's just the slow buildup, the slow, they go through all the details of the launch. It's, giving him the guy the numbers. You get probably 5 minutes of buildup as you gradually realize where it's headed.
Right.
And then you cut back to each character who is screwed with a freeze frame right before, and then, boom, and then 5:01 Eastern Standard Time. This is what happened.
Yeah, you're right, though. We could have gotten the hero shot. It'd be like Spider on a motorcycle, and he's just ahead of the explosion with his fist up in the air. It'd be great. No.
I love Michael Nunez during this period because he was in this movie, then he was in one of the Friday the 13th movies, and then he was in Action Jackson. So he had like all these, small to medium roles in films. Then he disappeared and then reappeared in Joanna Man and hasn't been seen since.
I mean, that seems like a good reason.
It's like once you've gotten killed in a outhouse, where is it to go?
Going back to the nuclear explosion, it's kind of nice how it just keeps elevating the threat all the time. Like, cutting it up didn't work. Like, we start with the brain shot, right? And they take the pickaxe to the brain. Doesn't work. Cutting it up doesn't work. Then we get to lighting it on fire and burning it. And it works sort of, right? And then that causes all of this. So then we escalate and we get to trying to shoot them or trying these different things, or the cops come in. And each time it elevates and shows us that there's such a threat that none of this shit matters. And then we literally nuke the fuck out of them and it doesn't matter.
They're like cockroaches.
That is an amazing threat level elevation throughout.
Yep. Well, it's a movie that once it gets, and this was, maybe not so unusual now. In the 80s, it was unusual. Once it starts up, so once they smack the canister in the poison, it is just constant conflict. No slow moments. It is all one situation, one crisis, and there's never a moment where the characters or the audience gets to relax. It's just one thing after another, after another, after another. And it's surprising for a zombie movie how little of it is, being chased by hordes of zombies.
Right.
It's all kinds of different stuff is happening in the movie.
Well, I even like how when they are chased by a horde, for lack of a better term, it's so different than what we're used to. It's them coming around the corner at the police and they're just straight charging, or it's them coming out of hiding and attacking the paramedics. Like, it's such a different feel than what we're used to when the horde of zombies attacks.
Right.
And we also never get like that. There's no fake jump scare. There's like the phone call at the beginning or things like that, but there's no fake zombie jump scare.
Right. And
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, the only thing that comes close is when the guy jumps through the window in the office. But you're expecting it, It's not cheap and it's not ridiculous or over the top.
Right. And the phone call jump scare is played for laughs. He spills everything. It's just showing.
Absolutely.
It's not to make the audience jump, it's to show that the character is jumping.
Exactly. But yeah, I appreciated that as well. Now, there's so much in this that was so good. Is there anything else in the documentary that you wanted to talk about? I haven't seen it, but if there's some other cool stories you wanted to share or anything like that.
No, it was a very difficult movie to make. It's one of those, they had, a really low budget. And when you listen, if you watch the behind the scenes stuff without watching the movie, you would say, boy, if this movie is even barely competent, it'll be good. It's because they had lots of challenges. But, the movie is absolutely fantastic. And then, of course, you can, a lot of it was Dan O'Bannon, though he was a pervy creep, took it very seriously. It wasn't, I'm going to do some cheap zombie movie. He, went out of his way to make sure it was original, as good as he could possibly make it. You got to wonder, because the whole Return of the Living Dead came out because George Romero and John Russo had a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And so they split up. And so the agreement was George Romero could make official sequels with word dead, so he could do Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and John Russo could do sort of unofficial sequels using Living Dead. So he couldn't promote them as direct continuations of Night of the Living Dead, but he could use the Living Dead title. And then what happened was he wrote a script which I assume sucked. Having read some John Russo stuff, his book Midnight is actually really good. But my assumption is that his script for Return of the Living Dead was not good. Having seen the 30th anniversary of Night of the Living Dead, where he added the new footage, it's like this. It probably was not good. And I think Dan O'Bannon completely, started from scratch. I don't think he retained any of it, which kind of upset George Romero. It's like that wasn't really the spirit of the agreement. The spirit was that John Russo would be doing stuff, but. So Dan O'Bannon, basically, they get story credit, but I don't think Dan O'Bannon used any of their material. But, he took it really, really seriously and tried to make the best movie possible, even though it was a zombie movie. And then you watch the documentary on Return of the Living Dead Part 2, and the director there didn't care. He was just kind of, I don't like horror movies. I don't really even want to be doing this. And it shows in the final product.
That sucks.
Because the Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is really, really jokey, which as a kid I liked. I was like, oh, this is even better than the first one. This is hilarious. And then I, didn't watch it for a long time. And then I was on another podcast where I said, let's review Return of the Living Dead 2. I'll watch it, and 20 years after the last time I seen it. And it was like, oh, this movie is terrible. It is abysmal. It is just everything you liked about Return of the Living Dead has been crapped on in Return of the Living Dead Part 2. And it basically just recycles the same story. So it doesn't say, oh, what happens after the nuclear bomb goes off? It's, hey, what if another vat of trioxin fell off a army truck and got accidentally opened? So it's as bad as Return of the Living Dead is good. But,
I'll make sure to skip that.
Yeah, it's basically every joke in Return of the Living Dead comes from a place of character. It comes from character. It comes from subverting expectations. So I hit the fucking brain is a hilarious line that he would say in that situation when you've been told that you killed impale the brain to kill the zombie. If it doesn't work, you say, I hit the fucking brain. You mean the movie lied? Every single joke in Return of the Living Dead is earned.
Yeah.
And then, Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is just goofy jokes. It's sight gags and, they chop off a zombie's hand and it gives the finger. And, it's a movie that I guess I was part of the target audience when I saw it the first time. And now I have stopped being part of the target audience and it's really bad. I haven't seen Part 3 since it first came out. So as soon as it hit VHS, I saw it, and I really liked it, but I haven't seen it again. And I've never seen Parts 4 or 5. So I assume they're not very good.
That's usually how it works when it gets to that point.
Yeah.
You were saying that the jokes are character based, and one of my favorite jokes in it is not a joke per se, but it made me laugh out loud. And it's at almost the beginning. I don't remember which one's the one that's holding the pickaxe. Was that Frank or Bert?
That was Bert.
Bert.
Okay, so it's Frank. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure before I say this. So Frank like hides and cowers, and he yells, "Be brave, God damn it!"
Be a man.
And I was like, that is a great joke. Like that is so real and so perfect. And so something that I basically see on Facebook every day. Yeah. And, I really appreciated that. But like you said, it's based in the character, and it's that actual, it's the ridiculousness of this comment in the situation. Mm-hmm. And man, it's so powerful.
Well, it's you cannot overstate how good James Caan is in this movie. Because it's a character that, if you describe him, I say, okay, there's this character in Return of the Living Dead, and as soon as things go bad, he falls apart and he's crying through the whole thing, and he's completely worthless, and he's, he needs to be told what to do, and then he can't do it. You say, oh, that sounds like a really irritating character. It's like, no, he is a funny, sympathetic. When he died, his death scene in the crematorium is, it's sad.
Yep.
It's disturbing because it's not graphic at all. You don't see a thing. You just hear it and you see the flames. But it's because you like this character, seeing him come to such a horrible end is genuinely upsetting for me. Still, watching it today, it's like, oh, this scene makes me kind of squirmy because it's just so unhappy. It's just like the tragic end to this character. And he's able to pull off where his breakdowns are really, really funny, but you think, that is a believable way from back, and he's not annoying at all. He's annoying in the second movie. They kind of do the same shtick, and it's irritating. But in this one, he's always on the side of it's funny. Like when Bert starts sawing off the head, he's like, oh no! It is a really, really funny moment, but it is because his performance is so good. You're just kind of like, that I can see a guy behaving like that, and he remains a likable character until his tragic demise.
Definitely. Well, even the screaming, like as he's dying, like the crematorium is closed and we can't see anything, but we hear his screams, and all I can think is that the dead can still feel. And I'm just like, man, where does that go with him? Like, is he like, I don't know how far it goes. Does it go all the way to being cremated? I don't know.
I hope he cranked those flames up to the top.
Right.
Well, as he said, when Ernie was using it, he said, I don't see what the big deal is. I could operate that thing. So
yep.
I'm sure he was able to crank it up all the way, because I like the idea that the crematorium has different settings where it's like, oh, here's regular cremation, and here's if we want to get rid of your heart, and oh, here's when we just want to burn the ashes some more. Where I just look at it like, okay, Ernie, you put a lot of thought in this, as a Nazi would.
Yep.
But I didn't have anything else. I mean, you guys brought up the fact of, or when Frank is leaving us, and the one thing I did notice about that scene, and I can't remember if I've noticed it before, but when I would watch this years ago, I never paid attention to when Frank leaves the chapel area when they're quarantining him and Freddie.
The Chapel of the Dawn.
Yeah, because Freddie has turned, which doesn't make sense that they both don't turn at the same time or within seconds of each other or even minutes. Maybe Frank has a little bit more willpower, but Freddie turns, and all the attention then turns to him. And Frank, I laughed my ass off when I watched it the other day. Frank just slinks out of the room like, all right, nobody's watching me. And if you're new to this, you're like, oh fuck, he's gonna go and kill some other people because he's turning. The zombies can think, they know what they're doing. He's gonna go kill some, and then you see this tragic moment where he takes the ring off, kisses it, and puts himself into the oven. And you realize, like, he saw what happened with Freddy. He's like, fuck that. That's not going to be me. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to hurt anybody else. I'll just go ahead and go out this way. Which, I mean, he's one, sacrificing himself so he doesn't hurt anybody. And two, he's sacrificing himself before he fully turns into that.
Yep. It's just
never got his pot roast. So sad.
I guess one other thing, we don't even need to discuss it. I will just say the music in this movie kicks ass.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It is one of the all-time best horror movie soundtracks.
I listened to the "Do You Want a Party" song like 3 times after I watched it. So I have a question for you, Don, and I kind of know where you're going to go with this, but I thought it would be interesting for our listeners. I know how much you love Night of the Living Dead.
Yes.
And I know that you love Return of the Living Dead.
Are you
Tell me about your feelings between the two. I'm not going to make you pick because I'm pretty sure you would pick Night, but just like what is the feeling difference there for you?
The feeling difference for at least the way I feel about this film in comparison to Night of the Living Dead. I would say I like this one more in the sense that I feel I can rewatch this film. I could probably, I say I watch it probably at least once a year. I could probably watch this movie once a month and not get tired of it because of the jokes and everything that are there. Night of the Living Dead, I have to be in the mood to watch it. Does that make sense? Like I have to fully process the stuff and then get my hopes up for Doug Jones. Ben to survive, and then have him killed at the end, which sucks. And then all the imagery that's there. I appreciate Night of the Living Dead more for the cinematic presence of it and the way things work in the film and the historical meaning of the film or historical worth of the film. Return of the Living Dead, I love because of just how fun it is. It's a fun zombie movie, but it's very, it's violent, it's gruesome. I would say out of my zombie movies, it's Night of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Shaun of the Dead, and then probably Zombieland.
Cool. What about you, Jeff? Where are your allegiances in the zombie genre?
Well, I think Return of the Living Dead is one of my favorites. Shaun of the Dead I like a little bit more. I think Return of the Living Dead is the better horror comedy, but Shaun of the Dead as a pure comedy is great. I think Night of the Living Dead is one of those where if I was talking to a new fan, someone was like, hey, you know what? I like horror films. I would show them Return of the Living Dead, just, hey, watch this one, pop it in. They would enjoy it. Night of the Living Dead is a undisputed masterpiece, but it requires some explanation. Like, look, this was made in 1968. The pacing is slower than you're used to. You would have to. I don't know that you could take a kid off the street, show him Night of the Living Dead, and have him appreciate it. You would need the explanation. This was, Ben was a revolutionary type of hero for that time. You didn't ever see that. There's a lot of stuff that the movie, I don't know that a brand new fan watching it 50 years later would appreciate. You kind of need to look here. Let me explain to you why this movie is so good, why it did all this stuff. I think Return of the Living Dead you could show to any fan who hadn't seen it. And I guess it requires some familiarity with zombie stuff. I think in 2020, everyone knows the basic zombie rules enough that you could, because part of the fun of the movie is that it subverts all your expectations. Mm-hmm. But I think anyone you could show Return of the Living Dead to, Night of the Living Dead, it's like, look, here is its place in history as one of the greatest films ever, but it's not going to work just to watch it as a movie.
Nice. So my top 5 are very different. So Zombieland is one of my favorite movies ever. So Zombieland's my number one. I'm going to follow that with Train to Busan. The ending kills me, and just the amount of emotion that they're able to tell in something as simple as like with this one kid reaching the car where the rest of his baseball team is. Like, it's so deep without a lot of unnecessary exposition. I would put Return of the Living Dead as my number 3 now. Having seen it this time, it might go up when I rewatch it, especially now that I'm looking for this Nazi stuff and a couple other things we talked about here today. And then I would go Night of the Living Dead after that. The one honorable mention I'm going to throw in, I wouldn't say it's fantastic, but I love all the different stuff they did with it, and that's Warm Bodies. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but I definitely throw that in there.
Yeah, I guess I didn't do 5. I think my one.
You didn't have to.
Choice, my controversial choice, I think, would be the Dawn of the Dead remake, which I think is fantastic.
Nice.
I really, really like that. I don't like it as much as the original Dawn of the Dead, but I went in like Dawn of the Dead. This, when it came out, was when I was watching every horror movie that played in theaters. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, this is going to suck, but I'm a loyal horror fan. I might as well go see this. And then, of course, the whole opening sequence is so good. It's like, wait, this might be good. And then, of course, I walked out and like, whoa, I could not believe they actually pulled off a Dawn of the Dead remake. But I know a lot of people hate it, probably just for being a Dawn of the Dead remake. But,
probably. I remember theaters, kind of. Those were the days.
Yeah. The Train to Busan sequel is playing. It's like, I'm not going to I really want to see Train to Busan 2, which isn't called Train to Busan 2, but it's like, I'm not going to sit in the theater and become a zombie to watch it. So,
right? Maybe that's the plot. No. Yeah. I don't have anything else. Do you guys have anything before we wrap this up?
No, I just feel like an idiot now because I'm like, God, I had Train to Busan on my list because it was number 2, not Return of the Living Dead. Yeah,
it is a worthy
choice. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe But as far as American zombie movies, Western zombie movies, because Shaun of the Dead, of course, is not. Western zombie movies, I would have it like
Give it time. I'm sure Train to Busan will become an American movie. So.
I hope not. I hope not. Leave it the way it is.
Yeah,
give
Train
us
to
the
Busan
sequels from the.
Unbelievably good.
Oh yeah. All right, cool. So why don't you tell our listeners where they can find your books online and follow you on social media and all that good stuff?
All my books are available from Amazon. If you go to www.jeffstrand.com, I've got plenty of information on all of them to help you make purchasing choices. I'm on Twitter as Jeff Strand. I'm on Instagram as Jeff Strand Author. And you can friend me on Facebook as Jeff Strand Author. And I'm not on the newfangled, if kids use it like TikTok or any of those, I'm too old for those. So,
yeah, we're coming of age social media people, not young adult social media.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been really great, and I'm so glad I watched this. And until next week, I am James Sabata,
and I'm Don Guillory.
And we will see you here on the Necronama.com.